Welcome to the latest episode of the People Will Talk podcast. Joining me as usual is Maria. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. You?
Very good, thank you. And we have special guest Jayne Marshall on the show. How are you, Jayne?
Yeah, I'm good as well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
An absolute pleasure. So we're going to hear in this interview about your writing, your editing, your connection to things like the Madrid Review. You have an amazing cultural profile here in the Spanish capital. But before we get to all of that, we have to start at the very start. So Jayne, you moved to Madrid with your sister. So did doing this with someone you know very well make this type of transition and country change much easier for you?
Yes, it absolutely did. And in fact, so much so I almost feel like I cheated a little bit by coming with my sister because as you probably know yourself, like I had somebody to share all of these weird, sort of wonderful, also very bewildering moments with, someone to chat those through with. But another reason is also because my sister's a lot more outgoing than I am. So I kind of think if I'd moved on my own, I probably would have spent like the first 2 years in my bedroom trying to get the courage up to leave the house. So it was great to be able to sort of tag along with her and in that way make friends and build a life here in Madrid. But I did also want to say about that on in the interests of balance that there did come a point where our journeys kind of bifurcated a little bit and we went sort of towards different paths, which at the time felt to me a lot like getting dumped because she wanted something different and I thought we wanted the same, you know how it goes. So yeah, we did have a big bust up about a year in. And it took us a while to get back to where we were, which is normally very close. But it's all okay now. And yeah, not just because she lives in London now.
Well, okay, that's quite interesting because it's a little bit different from other stories. So it's always nice to hear different experiences. But now I really have to congratulate you because you've just published your new book. You've been promoting it a lot. It's called A Line Drawn or Printed: 6 Routes Through Madrid. So it obviously examines your Madrid and the people you have met along the way and very much your experience, so drawing on what you've just mentioned of living here. So what's it like for you to be a non-Spanish person, let's say, in the Spanish capital?
Well, first of all, thank you for the congratulations. Well, for me, I have to say it's kind of great being a non-Spanish person here because I get to be what I like to call a legitimate foreigner versus the outsider I always felt myself to be back home in the UK because I grew up in, well, I think what is quite an unusual family. So always a little bit on the sort of edges of things and yeah, a little bit of an outsider. So when I came to Madrid, I actually felt kind of less foreign than I did at home because I was now like allowed to be foreign. I had permission to be that outsider because I actually was, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I was able to like embrace that identity instead of kick against it or question it. And yeah, I like that, and I never really, I suppose, wanted or was aiming to assimilate fully. Like I quite like that I'm different here as well.
It's a very interesting thing you mentioned there about the assimilation, because I feel that yeah, as a foreigner, you can never really fully assimilate into another culture because, I mean, in my case, I'm very white skinned. I have a big dirty Irish accent when I speak Spanish, so I'll never be, the guy from Huelva or whatever. So I think, yeah, I fully agree with your perspective there. Now, not only does your book have this interesting insight into what it is like to be a foreigner in Spain, which is always an interesting thing to pursue, as a narrative or as a story or an idea. But also the book has a lot of different styles. It's full of vivid sensations. I've read some really great reviews about the book that comment on this as well. So was there anything in particular that prompted you to maybe play around with the style of the book and not do a straightforward, I moved in this year, and then sequentially these are my experiences.
Yeah, well, thank you again. That's really nice to hear. Because yeah, as a reader, I've definitely always been drawn to sort of more non-standard structures, and as a writer too, I try not to get too boxed in by as you say, like the more linear or more straightforward like narrative line. Just I like to, if I can, just let the story go wherever it wants to. But when this is my debut, so when it came to putting the collection together, I was, I think, lacking a little bit of confidence, because it was my first time doing anything like that, and especially a collection I'd never, I'd written anything that I'd written before was standalone, so I wasn't really sure how to go about it. And to be perfectly honest, I thought it would be a case of pick my favorites, dump it in a Word document, write an intro, and then I'd be done. That I'm just being honest, because I know I'm sure a lot of other writers are listening. But yeah, it was clearly a lot more intricate than that, and I came to realize it was more like curation versus collection. But so anyway, when I sent the first draft, the Word document dump to Maria at Modern Odyssey, the publisher, she replied, and she was very courteous and very supportive, but with this kind of devastating question that I'll never forget for any writer. She just said, "What do you think it's about?" And I was like, "Oh no, it has to be about something." Like I don't know. I just thought a collection meant each story stood alone. They didn't necessarily have to be an overall arc. And like I say, I know I sound very stupid right now, but I'm just being honest. So anyway, that was like a real moment for me. And then I went back to the manuscript and I realized that the stories and essays could stand alone, but obviously also collectively with an overall meaning and message. And that's when I started looking for the connecting threads between the individual works. And then from there, I found the themes, or roots, as I've called them in the title. And then from there, also found the words for the introductions, which hopefully frames and holds them all together. So that was kind of my story, but my process. But I'm not sure if I would have got there without a bit of tough love.
Well, that's interesting. It's a very interesting structure, and I think it's refreshing to have something and a little bit different but it's true that sometimes you're looking at it, makes sense to you, and then somebody comes along and what seems annoying then then is useful in some way, but of course scary to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's I think we've all been through that, so on either side. So but yeah, but well, actually talking about Spanish for a moment, like stepping, well, not really stepping away from your book, because obviously your book is also about your experiences of living in Spain, and you studied Spanish before you came here, I believe, when you were younger.
Yes.
So do you feel that maybe like knowing that second language, does it have any influence in the way you write? Because this is something we discuss a lot with people we interview, because a lot of them, um, yeah, well, speak the language to different
Mhm.
degrees, but they're used to having the living experience of being in Spain, and sometimes think already into languages or dream into languages. How does that feel for you in terms of writing?
I love this question because yeah, I also really love and admire and am interested by multilingual writers, because I think that speaking more than one language really does give like a writer's work texture and just something extra that's kind of often hard to define, but it's there. I actually wrote an entire dissertation on Nabokov and Lucia Berlin for my master's because I'm so fascinated by it. So I would really love to think that it was the case with me, and that a second language informs my writing. But to be honest, I'm not sure. Like maybe because I admire so many other writers who are bilingual, multilingual. But maybe in the sense that, sort of related to the previous question, I think it might make me a little more open to unusual or more non-standard forms or structures or unusual ways to express things. like I'm not particularly worried if something, maybe I shouldn't say this as an editor, is a little grammatically off or something, because I I feel if it's doing the job, like of transmitting the feeling or the moment that I want it to, then better than it would do if it was more formally correct, then I'm happy, you know, to go with that. And that might come from knowing other languages and admiring other multilingual writers.
I really like your attitude towards writing, because you have a kind of a loose, organic view of it, which I think is really helpful, because a story can get constrained, I think, by certain structures,
Yeah.
and being free of that is just magical. And even what you said earlier, you know, because you said your editor said, "What's this about?" But I think also we kind of get stuck in this idea of a beginning, middle, and ends. And if you're an immigrant or you're just talking about your life, there's no beginning, middle, and end. It's just a case of, well, these are snapshots and moments, and so I think your structure, kind of circling back to that, is kind of you know, really supports that kind of idea as well. And this is all a roundabout way of saying that you have a great perspective, you have a lot of experience as well, which I'm sure you bring wonderfully to your writing group as well. So just as to, like, what is your writing group experience here? I mean, you lead a really interesting one, which I'm sure our listeners will be fascinated by. And also, as a second sneaky question I'll put in here as well, do you think there's a very vibrant writing scene here in the Spanish capital?
Yes, there definitely is. Just addressing the sneaky second one first. But it did personally it took me a while to discover it, and that's not like a comment on Madrid or the scene or anything. I think it comes back to the question about, like, with my coming here with my sister, I'm just a bit shy and it takes me a while to come out and discover these things. But yeah, definitely and I think it's growing and growing. And also, since I've been in the process of writing this collection and then promoting it, I've discovered loads more things that are going on and places that have events and stuff that I didn't know about before. So I really think I think Madrid's having a moment, actually, and that's I'm going to say it, I'm going to put it out there. But and then my kind of experience has been that I've had two writing groups. So one is still going, but it's going without me, because I had to concentrate my time on the second one, which is, I think, the one you're talking about, which is the co-writing sessions, the writers' hours. So that was maybe around 3 years ago that I discovered another online community, actually, called London Writers Salon, who started out doing silent writing sessions online during the pandemic. And then once the restrictions lifted, they started doing in-person ones. So first of all, I started doing one with them last year in Madrid, at Los Tres Hermanos de Moriarty, shop in Malasaña. And then now I've just been doing them on my own, like every 2 weeks. So basically what they are is kind of like the practice of writing in community. So you're with other writers, you get that kind of nice atmosphere, and you can discuss your work and things. But the main event is that we sit and write in silence together, which can sound a little bit weird, but I swear it just works so well, because you just really, really, really concentrate. And I think there's some kind of osmosis as well with being in the room with other writers. And when I discovered it online, it helped me so much with my practice that when the opportunity came up to do an in-person one in Madrid, I was like, yes, I'll do it.
That's quite interesting, because I think that the topic of concentration is a recurring one for writers, but also routines and things like that. I don't know. I'm really bad. It has to be. It comes when it comes. I cannot really sit down, but you always get the advice that you have to sit down every day, and be more methodical. Like I vouch that Enda is, but I'm not. So one thing I'm interested in is, like, you also write as a columnist in the Madrid review. So obviously, when you have to write a piece, it's far more like a task. You've got a regular deadline and you have to produce the writing. So what's it like? How is it different from just your organic sort of writing, or maybe you are very methodical, unlike me? I don't know.
But yeah, I was just going to say I'm quite jealous hearing that, Maria, because I'd love to. I'd kind of like to be more spontaneous, I think, but I'm the opposite. Yeah, just a bit of a, I don't know, I was going to say geek, but I don't know if that's the right word. Basically, I love deadlines and I love lists and I love spreadsheets and all those and fashionable things or things that you don't necessarily associate with the creative life. But yeah, so for me, a regular deadline for anything is welcome, because then I can also use that as like to help me structure my time for the writing and other editing. But also in the case of the Madrid review, I get to write about writing, so that's just like pure joy for me. So yeah, it's double joy. Get to write about writing and I get a deadline.
So it's great that you have this process and this discipline to, I mean, of course, as an editor and a writer, these are very helpful things. And given that you are an experienced editor, and as you mentioned, there's probably other writers listening to this podcast right now, do you think there are maybe traps that writers fall into, especially if they're first-time ones, that could be easily avoided? And if they avoid them, it makes their writing better, and maybe they'll get published some way by avoiding them. Any tips about that?
Well, it's a great question, and my immediate kind of response is yes, probably there are like traps that we all fall into, but I don't know if this is very helpful. I think it's more in the wider sense of that all writers have blind spots. It's, and you'll know as well as editors and publishers, it's just natural and human, and even really experienced writers or even ones that work in the industry, it happens to us all, because we all just go blind to our work at some point. That moment where you just stop being able to see or analyze and just have to hand it over to somebody else to to guide you. So yeah, those will be specific to each writer. So I think the common trap is just to be aware that maybe we definitely all have them, and accepting that might help. I can share my own, if you like, my own blind spot. That would help.
Sure, if you're comfortable doing so, yeah, of course.
Yes, just telling all my secrets today. So, I mean, I'm sure I have more than one, but the one that people comment on the most is that I'm basically like the opposite of kill your darlings. So I often pare things down so much that something ends up so kind of stark that the reader is frustrated or just a bit confused by the lack of detail or context. So I have to always remind myself, well, to think of the reader, which is always a good one as well. But I have to remind myself to write around what I'm writing about, or just write more in general. So I know that's one of mine. So yeah, I don't know if that's massively helpful, but just to be aware that we all have them, and to be open to outside help and feedback, of course, from anyone really, other writers, other editors. Because I had a little look at this question before, so I did have another bit of advice that I could share if you like, but it's a bit more it's a little bit less practical and more maybe emotional.
So, again, I mean, we'd love to hear it if you're happy to tell us. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's
sure.
gold.
Well, one of my big things is that about advice is to be wary of advice as well, because I'm sure, as you know as well, there's a huge industry clamped onto writing about how to write and everything, and I personally find that really overwhelming. So I'm always, first of all, wary of advice. But yeah, what I was going to share is that my kind of experiences in my like getting into the writing world was a really like baptism of fire, because I just started writing about my experiences after I immigrated to Madrid, and as I mentioned, that was just like me in my flat on my own, not sharing my work with anyone. And then it was my sister who suggested I apply to the creative writing masters at Oxford, which I thought sounded insane, but I did it anyway, and I got in. So I went from my bedroom to Oxford, and that was the first time I'd ever met another writer. it was the first time I'd ever shared my work, and it was the first time I'd ever had to workshop my work. So I think like that gave me this kind of strange combination of being open to feedback, but also having to rely on some like deep well of confidence that I had something interesting to say, or even if it wasn't that interesting, that I could say it interestingly. So I had to kind of rely on this sort of inner strength, and but at the same time remain open. And I remember this one workshopping session where one of my classmates just kept saying over and over again, "Where are the stakes, Jayne? Where are the stakes?" And it was like, I knew what he meant, but it wasn't a very high stakes kind of piece. So I was just kind of mulling over what he said, thinking, where can I add some stakes here? And then someone else, another classmate, actually passed me a note, like we were back in school, that said, "Don't listen to him. It's great as it is." And I think that kind of summarizes what I was trying to say as my advice, is that I was open to this other man's feedback, although he didn't have to be quite so shouty, maybe. But at the same time, I believed that the piece was okay without the stakes. I just had that feeling. So I guess, yeah, just you got to believe in yourself, but you've also got to be open to feedback. That was the long way around of saying that.
That's an amazing answer. Honestly, it's so insightful, I think. And you're right. I mean, publishing something is emotional as well, and part of our jobs as editors in our publishing company is to help the writer as well when they get their attack of nerves or whatever it is, because it's a long, curvy road. But no, fantastic insights. Jayne, I wish we had more time to talk to you, because you are a fountain of wisdom, honestly. But for the moment, allow me to say thank you so much for being here. I really loved it.
Well, thank you. I loved it too. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jayne. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.